So today we're gonna start the evaporator up. So we're gonna split a bunch of wood up first before we get going. Um, I split them really small so I can get them burning real hot to help evaporate quicker. So we have a cart here that I just split them. Got the big blocks from the mill, the sawmill, and then we just split them into really small pieces. This isn't real dry wood, so it's not the greatest for evaporating, but I have a blower on my evaporator which creates almost like a forge effect, so it can burn even stuff that's not completely dry. This will burn a little bit longer, so I get a little bit longer burn time. It's not quite as hot as like red elm. We do have some of that too, that sometimes I'll be putting some of that in and mixing it later on. But like right now, I'm gonna start it with just real small pieces. Most of this is like oak, and I think there's some cherry in here too. Like I said, with the blower on there, I can burn somewhat green wood and still get pretty good heat out of it. So I'm gonna go ahead, keep splitting, and once we get that done, we'll start up the evaporator and actually start cooking down some sap. Okay, so today we're just going to go ahead and fill up the evaporator. We'll probably get some boiling done later on, but I usually don't light it until I have sap in it because it does get hot and I don't want to warp the stainless pan. So you turn it on here and that takes it out of this tote. And then I turn this valve here on and that runs it through the filter system over here. So now what it does is it runs into this channel and then it comes down to this end, goes through this divider, runs up here, goes through this divider, and then up to here. Then it comes out on this valve and I open this one up, then it comes out and goes over here once it's full, once it all runs up down through there. So we'll just wait a few seconds and let this get caught up. So then once I'm actually evaporating, what I'll do is I'll set this at a slower drip rate so it just comes in a little bit at a time. So I can turn this down to about as low as I want to. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it all the way up because I want to get it filled up. So what this does with these channels in here, and then this other one down here has the same channels. So what I'm doing is I'm taking cold sap and I'm putting it over there. And even with the cold sap going in there, this side can still be boiling or still really warm. I'm not adding cold sap or complete cold sap to this whole pan at one time, which would keep it from boiling down. And then it does the same thing over here. Once you open this up, it can run into this pan here, and it does the same thing. So this sap is warm, but it's not as warm as what the sap is in this pan. So then it does the same thing. It'll run down this channel, comes through the bottom over here, runs through this channel, and then it runs into this pan. So these here are my, these two here are my finishing pans. So when I get syrup at that point that's ready to come off, I can go ahead and disconnect everything over here and slide them forward. So now this one here, you can open this one up, and then that lets the sap into this channel here. This is a single pan that just goes up and then back. And this does the same thing. This sap is going to be warmer than the sap that's up here, so it's not going to stop this one from boiling when I add it in. Then the same thing for here. The sap goes this way, and then it comes here, and then I open up these two valves, and then it can run into this pan. Then this pan is boiling, and then I can go ahead and open these two, which run it into this pan. So once I get it full and I'm evaporating it down and I'm adding more sap up there, or it condenses as it steams off. It boils off the water, and what's left is the sugar, and that's what syrup is the boiled off. All the water is, most of the water is boiled off, and you end up with syrup at that point. So up there is just sap, and then when you get down to these pans here, these are just like diluted out syrup in these. So then what I do when they're all full, I shut these and I let this one finish, and I'll keep adding to these. Like I'll open these back up and keep adding to these as it evaporates down. This one here then at the end will actually be syrup. So what you have to do is I made all these valves. So now you loosen up this valve here once that's done, and you can pull this one off, and you dump it into your pan or whatever wherever you're putting it. Then this pan is full of condensed sap. So then I take this one out like that, and this slides down to this point. Now this is going to be my new syrup pan, and I'm going to take this one, slide it back into here. This gets hooked back up, and at this point you got to do this part pretty fast, because now this is an empty pan and there's a fire right below it. So then you open that up right away, and then this one will start filling. Then you go ahead and just hook this one back up here, and you just keep doing that. You keep swapping these out from one to the other. So once, you really wouldn't have to hook this one back up. I do it just in case there's a point where this is boiling down too far, where there's only a little bit of syrup in there. That would be like later in the season when it takes more sap to make the same amount of syrup. So usually by the time it gets down to here, if I fill this pan up to here and move it forward, by the time it gets down to there, that's going to be pure syrup in the bottom of that. If it would get to the point later in the season when that boils down too far, where it's going to start foaming up and boiling out, I just go ahead and add some more to it. This usually, by the time, if I boil this down completely, I usually end up with about 2 gallons of syrup in this front pan. Sometimes it's only a gallon, but usually it's like 2 gallons at a time. Then I take that into the house and it goes into glass jars. They're 2-gallon glass jars, and I let that sit for a week, and then all the sediment, some of the sugar sand they call it, will settle out of the maple syrup, and then I just pour the syrup, pure syrup, off the top of that sand or sugary type sand. A lot of people, what they'll do is once they dump it off, they have a special machine that it's called a draw off, and when this syrup, when it gets to this right consistency, it just dumps the syrup into a pan. Then you have to run that through a filtration system, and it's called a filter press, and it's kind of an expensive piece of machinery. A lot of people will add like diatomaceous earth to the syrup, and that binds with the sugar and the particles in the syrup, and then the filter can catch that. But we don't do any of that. We just let it settle out naturally, and then once it settles out in about a week, then we bottle it. So then we have to heat it back up to that 180-degree mark, and then we go ahead and bottle it. And the 180-degree mark is a point where you want your syrup to, when you get it in the bottles, that'll reseal. Because once you open maple syrup, it has to be sealed or refrigerated. So here I can kind of tell right now it's starting to fill up this can already. We're getting sap in there. But like I said, it just filters down through the chambers and then comes into these. And what that does is it just prevents the sap, so you can have a hot boil the whole way through, that it doesn't actually get cold sap dumped into it, and then that stops the boil. So that's us just starting the evaporator. It takes a little time to warm up. Like I said, I have the gas blow or the electric blower on there. The firebox in this is about 2 feet or 18 inches wide, 2 feet wide by 36 inches long. So I can put a pretty good chunk of wood in there. So the firebox is just here in the beginning, and then that's called the arch back there. And what the fire does is it gets forced all the way back, and that's what warms up those other pans. So the main fire is on the first 4 pans here. So we'll let this burn a little bit and we'll talk a little more. But I'm Bill from My Fine Homestead. Thank you for watching Maple Syrup Season Part 7.